All right, let's take you straight back to Hong Kong, where the situation is unfolding quite quickly there. You see the protesters gathering outside the LegCo building. They have been doing so for hours. They managed to make their way inside the building, knocking down the exterior parts with really anything they could find. Now, we want to get more analysis on the situation from Andrew Leung. He is a China specialist, joining us live from from Hong Kong. And Andrew, today, just a few moments ago, we started by asking you why the protests have suddenly turned more destructive than before. Do you see that perhaps as being because of the handover anniversary as sparking off this escalation?
No, as I was saying, the handover ceremony has always been targeted as the culmination of this groundswell of protests dating back nearly over a week ago. So this is the climax, as it were, and this underlines a groundswell of dissatisfaction with the way the one country, two systems has been handled over the years, apparently tilting towards the one country rather than the two systems. But what we are seeing that the protests are turning more and more violent, especially at the front line, and you just witnessed the circling and breaking into the legislature council building, and then the police apparently are just standing by and with great restraint. The fear is that this is a deliberate provocation of the police to take forceful action, and ideally even calling for some drastic actions like a curfew or even mobilizing the PLA, because if that should happen, one country, two system would finish. And then the Hong Kong and China's detractors would rub their hands in glee. So I think the government is very well aware of this risk and is holding back, letting the protesters do their worst. They're letting the Hong Kong people see that really in the front line there are some very unruly and violent elements. And showing that the government is treating this with great restraint. And of course, this morning, the chief executive, during the cocktail reception, immediately after the flag-raising ceremony, already promised that the whole mode of governance would change, listening more to the people, especially the young people, and really this is a watershed in Hong Kong's governance. But then at this critical juncture, I think the government's learned from past protests, like the umbrella movement and really all these massive demonstrations in recent days. Because you can see that the front line is also being manned with very violent hooligans, and then the back is composed of peaceful and orderly students. So you can't treat the whole kind of movement with violent suppression. So this is a very delicate moment for a test for Hong Kong's governance.
Indeed. Is it a change in strategy in the security, in the sense that they're giving these protesters, well, at least a small group of them, enough rope to hang themselves by this violence that's coming up? And it really is a tale of two groups of protesters, isn't it? Because there is also the peaceful part, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, this is the people power. But then the people power, there are several preconditions. First of all, there is as I said, a groundswell of dissatisfaction, because you can't engineer this kind of people power in peaceful countries, so for example, in Scandinavia and Switzerland, that kind of thing. But this in Hong Kong, there's already building up a groundswell of dissatisfaction, and then the unruly elements are taking advantage of it, and then there are various other forces hostile to Hong Kong or to China, sort of feeding it at the back. And there are reports of higher hooligans, paying people something like several thousand Hong Kong dollars a day to take violent action. But these are the minority, and they are, of course, in the front line. At the back are the ordinary, very passionate students, ordinary citizens. So you've got to look at the complexity of this kind of people power. There are more, various other dimensions at work.
Yeah, as you've described it, it does seem sort of various elements at play. You mentioned that the government, the Chinese government, has been very restrained up until this point. We're looking at images now of the sort of a barricade behind some shutters, and it does look like the shutters have been breached somewhat by the more hardline elements of this protest group. They haven't come face to face yet. They haven't interacted with each other, the police and the protesters. How do you see the government handling this situation right now? You mentioned it's on a very delicate sort of watershed moment, on a knife's edge, in fact.
Well, I mean, there is in fact an example which happened only about a couple of sort of days ago when they stormed the Legislative Council building as well, and then the sort of front line, well, sort of unruly elements threw sort of sharp metal sticks as well as bricks at the police, and then the police opened fire with tear gas and rubber bullets, and that led into a huge amount of outcry, and even demanding an independent inquiry into the alleged use of excessive force by the police. So I think the police is learning from that example, the recent example, and it's trying to hold back. But of course, there is an absolute deadline that, because then there is no question that the mobs cannot be allowed to just storm and occupy the Legislative Council building. You know, that would spell the land of law and order in Hong Kong. So I think that the police are going to stand firm and will take appropriate action. Obviously, the cordon of policemen at the front, they're all trained, and they're all just even rehearsed this kind of possibilities in advance.
You know, Carrie Lam, the chief executive, must surely be seeing these live pictures along with the rest of the world. She has been keeping a very, very low profile since her last apology. Is it perhaps the time for her to say something now? What's her strategy?
Well, this morning I attended the cocktail reception. Sorry, I've got to end this now because there was another call from BBC.
No, we absolutely understand.
Yeah,
I'm sure they can wait, Andrew.
But I think that she's likely to watch the situation carefully. But I said that the red line is that it mustn't be provoked into taking drastic action, because otherwise that would spell the end of one country, two systems.
All right,
okay.
Thanks very much for that, Andrew. We'll let you get along to your next important call. Andrew Leung there, China specialist, speaking to us from Hong Kong, telling us all about how the protests have been sort of pushing authorities to sort of a watershed moment as to how they handle what has been going on. The images you can see on your screen, two sides of the same barrier, it would seem. Protesters with the yellow hard hats on one side, and the police with their riot shields standing at the ready and waiting. We'll be following this story to see what happens and how this unfolds. So do keep it here on CNA.